Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Barbados assesses damages after Hurricane Elsa. This story takes the lead in a 1147th edition of Caribbean Perspective for Tuesday, 6th July 2021. Details after this break.
Hubbard's big promotion is back. Live free for 1 year. Spend $50 or more in any Hubbard's department and receive a chance to win big prizes every month. Property or vehicle insurance for 1 year. Free internet, cable and data for 1 year. Free fuel for 1 year. Free cooking gas for 1 year. Free electricity for 1 year. Free drinks for 1 year. Extra cash account and the big free groceries for 1 year. Promotion runs from April 1st to September 30th, 2021. Live free for 1 year with Hubbard's in association with Solgas, Flow, Grenadian General Insurance, Carib Brewery, Coca-Cola, Grenada Bottling Company, Grenlec, Communal Cooperative Credit Union, Dutch Lady Milk, Promo, Danny and Supreme. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back. Barbadians spent the entire Saturday cleaning up their island in the wake of Hurricane Elsa, which caused 62 houses to collapse, damaged more than 1,000 homes and left 743 of them without roofs. The majority of the island was left without electricity as the hurricane downed power lines. Stetson Babb of CARICOM filed this report.
Prime Minister Motley and her cabinet today toured some of the worst affected areas, many of them in the south of the island, in the wake of Hurricane Elsa, which yesterday battered Barbados with winds of up to 90 miles an hour, apparently taking many people by surprise despite the warnings from the authorities. Barbadians are accustomed to storms generally just brushing past the country with minimal, if any, impact, and very seldom over the past half a century or so, any major damage. This time it was different. According to the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, which is headquartered here, up to this morning, Barbados' Emergency Operations Center had received more than 800 reports of damaged homes. Almost 600 of these reports were in relation to roofs damaged or blown off altogether. And up to this morning, 6 shelters were still open and about 24 people were still seeking refuge in some of them. The airport and seaport were not significantly impacted, but the main hospital took a battering with parts of the roof lifted and some departments flooded. In the car park, trees were uprooted and the ambulance service headquarters suffered significant external damage. At one point during the storm, every household in Barbados lost electricity and many also had no water. At midday, the Barbados Light and Power Company reported service restored to 60% of its customers and said it was aiming to increase that figure to 80% within 48 hours. The Category 1 hurricane dumped 6 to 8 inches of rain on Barbados, felled trees and power lines across the country, and the massive cleanup is only just getting started. Stetson Babb in Bridgetown, Barbados.
Unvaccinated nationals will not be able to enter Trinidad and Tobago via the ANR Robinson International Airport in Tobago when the borders are reopened soon. Details in this TTT news item.
Chief Medical Officer reminds that unvaccinated individuals will require a PCR test 72 hours prior to arrival and will undergo 14 days state-supervised quarantine. But Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says those unvaccinated individuals will only be allowed to enter via the Piarco International Airport.
We want to make sure that, one, we preserve Tobago. It being a separate entity, it is possible to preserve a lower level of exposure in Tobago. And two, the logistics of managing unvaccinated people. The government is not prepared to take on that in 2 airports when we could do it well in 1. Because if you're coming unvaccinated, it's a whole operation to deal with you.
Fully vaccinated passengers also require a PCR test prior to arrival and proof of vaccination, but will not have to undergo quarantine. With regards to cruise ships, the Prime Minister says they will not be allowed to enter this country when the borders reopen.
That's a separate decision as to whether a cruise ship which brings a large number of people at any one time. And that is going to be taken in the context of gatherings and quick mixing of the population. So that decision has not yet been taken about cruise ships.
Dr. Rowley, meanwhile, clarified that unvaccinated non-nationals will not be able to enter this country. However, he stated that once vaccinated, yachtas will be allowed entry since both the air and sea borders would be reopened.
Outgoing CARICOM chairman Dr. Keith Rowley of Trinidad and Tobago says the African Union will deliver a fair number of COVID-19 doses to the grouping this month.
The Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister revealed this at a media briefing on Saturday. He says the region will also receive 400,000 doses in August and 500,000 in September. Dr. Rowley says this steady stream of vaccines will help get the region closer to herd immunity. CARICOM is also expecting vaccines from the United States, but Dr. Rowley says the U.S. has not yet ordered their release. He says CARICOM will continue looking at the market for vaccines to purchase. New CARICOM chair, the Honorable Prime Minister Gaston Brown, will lead the grouping for the next 6 months.
The government of Antigua and Barbuda to increase COVID-19 surveillance in all local communities to ensure that people are not knowingly carrying the virus.
The country has no active laboratory confirmed cases of the virus. The Prime Minister says needed to manage
to include Dr. Simon and those operating at the community level will be literally carrying out testing within the communities in order to identify undetected, perhaps asymptomatic COVID patients in our communities.
The Prime Minister says this is needed to manage the risk of the concerning viral mutations.
The most recent COVID variant, the Delta variant, obviously has resulted in a significant amount of transmissions in the UK, and again is becoming, very difficult, especially among the unvaccinated population.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
Chinese and Cuban workers on government-sponsored programs should be among those screened as potential victims of human trafficking.
The recommendation comes from the United States Department of State, which recently issued its 2021 Trafficking in Persons report, where Antigua and Barbuda remained at Tier 2. Tier 1 countries and territory governments fully comply with minimum standards. The document found that the government does not meet the minimum standards for the elimination of human trafficking, but making significant efforts to do so. The State Department says the government demonstrated an overall increase in efforts compared to the previous reporting period, considering the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on its anti-trafficking capacity. A new anti-trafficking unit was created, and the country worked with an international organization to develop preventative measures. But the government fell short in other areas. No victims of human trafficking were identified, and the proactive screening of vulnerable populations, such as migrants, was recommended. The document also says no traffickers have been recently prosecuted or convicted. The U.S. Department of State recommends vigorously investigating, prosecuting, convicting, and punishing traffickers. This includes complicit officials.
Former Guyanese President David Granger has called the PPPC administration out on what he deems to be the mismanagement of the recent countrywide flooding, while calling for an inclusionary resolution to the disaster. Here is HGP's Wendell Badri with the details.
During an airing of the public interest show on the PNCR's Facebook page on Friday, the former president noted that during his government's tenure, it established regional public broadcasting stations around the country for the purpose and intent of information being filtered to and through the right channels in a timely manner in the event of natural disasters, such as the recent countrywide flooding. He surmised that the incumbent administration might have been ignorant of a number of facts, thus the lengthy delay in providing aid, among other things, to the citizenry.
That this was Guyana's worst natural disaster
And you would wonder why something so grave, so serious, took so long to be acknowledged. I can only assume that people were ignorant of the impact of climate change and ignorant about what is taking place around the country.
Granger lamented that it took in excess of 40 days before a declaration was made, identifying the flood situation as a level 2 threat. This, he says, was far too long, while he reiterated that the government should have had mechanisms in place to filter that kind of information to it in the shortest possible time.
But it could have been done earlier, or we could even have avoided it if the government had responded to the crisis earlier in May. But it didn't. It waited 44 days. And the CDC announcement was just a confirmation of the gravity of the flood.
A level 2 threat in terms of disasters indicates that the country is not overwhelmed in terms of its ability to provide aid to those affected, but would require some level of assistance, however, from external sources. The Civil Defense Commission had stated that 5 regions in the country were classified as level 2, while the other 5 were deemed to be level 3 in terms of the damage caused. The former president said that there seemed to be no plan in place as to how the money from the $10 billion fund, which was approved by the National Assembly some 2 weeks ago for flood relief aid, would be utilized.
It did not seem as if a plan had been presented to the National Assembly or been presented to the people of Guyana, and nobody is quite sure how that amount of money would be spent. It would be spent properly, if it would be spent on acquiring equipment, if it would be spent on food stuff. Nobody knows for sure.
Granger reminded that pretty soon the December rains will come, and with that in mind, an exit strategy needs to be developed. He suggested that an all-inclusive strategy is the way to go at this juncture.
Develop an inclusive approach to solving the problem. Everybody's coming up with, with short-term plans, and we need an inclusive. Let us get the best Guyanese brains. Let us see the opposition and the government working together to get out of this disaster.
Just recently, United States Congressman Hank Johnson, via his official website, www.hankjohnson.house.gov, posited that he is monitoring the situation in Guyana while empathizing with those affected by the floods. The congressman noted in his statement that, and I quote, "Guyana's wealth is for all the people of Guyana, irrespective of their ethnicity," end quote. Several reports had surfaced that flood relief was being doled out to selective communities and households across the country. Reporting for the HGB Nightly News, Wendell Battery.
Did you know that your friends and family can now shop at the Food Fair from anywhere in the world, and you can receive here in Grenada? The Food Fair and GrenadaMarket.com now make it possible through secure online shopping and personalized customer service. Simply send your loved ones a list of your preferred items or let them fill an online basket, and the items will be available for pickup or delivery. Visit GrenadaMarket.com or thefoodfair.gd today for more details. The new norm. Spread the news.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.